Hello, I'm Craig Rotzler, Senior Conference Manager with FDA News, and welcome to today's webinar. Are you done with UDI, or is it just the beginning? This webinar is sponsored by Dassault Systèmes. The 3D Experience Company provides a business solutions platform on-premise, online, and on the cloud. Their solutions for medical device, pharma, and biotech, and patient care companies connect innovative virtual 3D designs with patients, physicians, and other research, regulatory, and clinical communities to help maximize operational efficiencies and improve patient outcomes. We're expecting the presentation to last about 45 minutes, followed by a live question and answer session. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Please feel free to prepare questions for our presenters. We encourage you to ask questions at any time during the presentation, and the questions will be addressed at the end. To ask a question, simply type your question in the area provided and press enter. Questions will not be viewable to other attendees. It's our pleasure to introduce the speakers for today. Terry Reed is a Senior Advisor for UDI adoption at the FDA. Terry has spent her career advocating for the operational integration of data standards and informatics principles into healthcare and government systems in order to improve the efficiency and regulatory submissions and public health reporting. Her latest role as Senior Advisor for the UDI adoption is the culmination of years of system analysis, information science, and regulatory science experience aimed at significantly improving device evaluation and decision-making through the adoption of UDI across the device ecosystem. We also have Aria Halpern, a business consultant for the life sciences industry at Dassault Systèmes. He is responsible for creating and developing 3DS strategy and associated solutions in the medical device, combination products, pharmaceutical, and patient care industry segments. Aria has worked with medical device companies, quality, regulatory, and R&D executives to develop and support businesses, strategies in the areas of product development and cross-enterprise collaboration, which has resulted in the development of the company's UDI and global market registration solutions with the 3D Experience platform. They are joined by Daniel Matlis, founder and president of Exendia. Dan has over 25 years of experience in the industry, spanning the entire value chain. He has been involved in projects covering R&D, commercial operations, regulatory compliance, business development, and information technology. Dan is an active member of the FDA's Case for Quality initiative and has presented Exendia's research findings in industry to industry executives and the FDA. I'll now turn the floor over to Dan. You may go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you're listening from. What I'd like to do today is give you a brief update on our agenda. We'll first hear from Terry on FDA's perspective on UDI. We'll then have a panel discussion talking about some of the key points and key benefits of UDI beyond just having an ID on the product. And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience to hear your perspective and to answer your questions. So what's the value of UDI beyond just putting lines on products? Dr. Shuren, who is the director of CDRH, has made it very clear that while UDI may be an acronym, really the value of unique identification stands for better information, better access to safe and effective medical products, and ultimately better patient health. And really, as an industry, that's what we're all about. As an industry, we are developing and marketing products that improve patients' lives. So really, UDI is an enabler for that. And as Dr. Shuren said, by promoting the incorporation of UDI into electronic health information, we can unlock an untapped amount of real-world data that can be used for clinical purposes. It could be used in order to develop digital twins to better support and bring products to market, and really closing the loop on improving product quality and really understanding the benefits of risk profiles of medical devices. So really what we're talking about is the value of UDI goes well beyond meeting a regulatory requirement to add your product to the Good ID database and ensure that you are printing the appropriate identifiers. So to learn a little bit more about FDA's perspective on that, I'd like to turn it over to Terry Reed to give us her insight. Terry?
Thank you, Dan. I am going to start by taking the next 20 minutes or so talking to you about what UDI is, why it's important for patients in healthcare, and how we are defining value and improving that value of UDI through some efforts, some pilots, and the learning UDI community that I'll talk about in more detail. So let's start off with, what is UDI? This picture is a busy label that actually depicts two depictions of UDI. It has a UDI in a GS1 format and a UDI in a HIBIC format. So the top line, that is a single line barcode, is the GS1 format, and you can see in yellow that the DI up in the UDI equals DI plus PI. That stands for device identifier and production identifier. That the device identifier is in yellow in both of the representations of UDI, and that the production identifiers are in green. And if you can see, there's patterns here. So the lot number that's represented A1234 is also represented in the easily readable plain text under the barcode. So the requirement on UDI is that they not only have a human readable but a machine readable format of the UDI. It's required on the device package, and it must be in plain and machine readable text. So if we break all of the UDI regulations down, there are two basic requirements on manufacturers. One is that the label of every medical device shall bear a unique device identifier. Again, there's the three formats here, GS1, HIBIC, and ICC-DBA. Those are accredited issuing agencies that FDA has accredited to be able to generate UDIs. The second requirement for manufacturers is the label of the device must be provided and submitted to our global unique device identification database. What I have listed here is the link to the Access Good ID, which is the public-facing portion of that UDI database. I want you to know that as of now, and I'm sure this number is out of date because we get submissions of thousands of records a day, but as of last week, we had more than 1 million device identification records in that global unique device identification database. One of the reasons we had so many of those records is because at the end of September, on September 24th, we met a milestone for Class 2 devices, and so now the UDI database has Class 2 devices, implantable life-supporting and life-sustaining devices, and Class 3 devices. What are the benefits of UDI just overall? Highlighted on the left, they are to improve patient safety, to provide more accurate understanding of device decision-making related to the benefits and risks of a particular device, and to facilitate device innovation and patient access. So specifically, UDI is used to identify, that can be used to identify and remove unsafe products by being associated with recalls, increasing the likelihood of identifying counterfeit products. It allows for, by being used by all data sources, it can provide the link between data sources to help better evaluate patient outcomes, product performance, and it can also inform other regulatory decision-making and the better understanding of which patient device characteristics match with an improved device design. I provided this slide as an insight into the UDI program at FDA. This program depicts the major buckets of how our program is set up. And so we have spent, as the compliance state has come forward, much time in the data collection, the facilitating of manufacturers and labelers getting their information into the Global Unique Device Identification database. With that has been a tremendous amount of educational materials that we've put on our website. We've had webinars specific to manufacturers. We've also had webinars for healthcare providers for the adoption side of the house. And we have, as evidenced by several guidances that we've already put out, policy changes and updates that are ongoing. And my side of the house, the adoption and data use, works with the other through this arrow. You can see that we are all focused on data quality improvement, collaboration, and communication across the program so that we can provide you with a consistent message, and we can all drive towards the usefulness of the data and its increase in the healthcare systems. So I also wanted to share some lessons learned over the last 3 years in the adoption activities specifically, and those are related to the importance. I broke up the UDI equals the device identifier plus the production identifier. Over the course of the last 3 years, we've realized how important that device identifier is on its own and how important it is to break up the UDI into those production identifiers as well. Because the device identifier is the key to that UDI database, and as I've mentioned, it can be a link if all data sources capture that DI in a separate field. It can be a link across data sources. We have also recognized the need for a community that comes together and comes to a common understanding of some very complex UDI adoption issues. And so we have worked with ARM, the Association for Healthcare Resources and Materials Management, to be part of their steering committee for the Learning UDI community. We also recognize that we need to integrate and not have UDI adoption as some separate activity, but as an integration in existing activities. Any kind of device initiatives, in particular the National Evaluation System for Health Technology, which includes the partnership of data sources such as registries, EHRs, and we also are part of the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum activities. We've put strong emphasis on demonstrating the value, the benefit of UDI through pilots, ROI analysis, and early adopters. That is a principle of UDI adoption. And as a principle, we see ourselves as a pillar of the National Evaluation System for medical devices. The goal of that system, this was a strategic priority, was to establish that system. Has been established. There's an announcement about that. One of the goals of that priority is access and use of real-world evidence to support regulatory decision-making. So I thought I would give you an example. So that real-world evidence comes, of course, from real-world data. Examples of that are electronic patient records, clinical registries, both national and international, and claims data as it is, and UDI as part of all of those systems, again, integrated into those systems as available. And the idea is to obtain that access to that data to generate real-world evidence. How could that be used for regulatory decision-making? So examples of that would be the expansion of labels or indications for use for a particular product based on real-world evidence, identifying potential safety signals, and leveraging registries to improve devices and innovation of devices. Why is unique device identification important? I'm just going to go quickly through this. This is an analogy to cars. So I went out, we have for a long time compared the UDI to VIN numbers. And I went out to 2010 data to see a comparison. And as you can see, in 2010, there were 1 million cardiac catheterization procedures and 1,230,000 Hondas sold. There were similar numbers, 719,000 knee arthroplasties and 908,000 Nissans sold that year, and 332,000 hip replacements and 358,000 Volkswagens sold. This comparison, the numbers are similar, but the notification and the access to performance data is very different. On the cars on the right, if there was a recall about that car, because your VIN number is associated with your experience with that car, you would have been notified of that recall. Because your experience with an implant associated with one of these procedures is not currently strongly tied to the UDI or a device identifier, you would not be notified, more than likely, of a recall associated with the devices in those procedures. So for adoption, getting that information into those electronic health records, linking the patient experience with the implanted device and the UDI of that device is extremely important as a key step. And we have worked with the Office of National Coordinator for Health IT to push that forward. They actually created a regulation in 2015 which requires health IT software to be able to generate an implantable device list based on the UDI, and that the UDI would be part of essential information that would be passed from one system to another in health IT for the coordination of patient care. And that data set is called the Common Clinical Data Set. Very quickly, I want to show you how what the recipe is for a health IT vendor when they're trying to include UDI as part of this implantable device list. So they start with an implant with UDI. The requirement is to be able to record that UDI and to break it up into the production identifier in green and the device identifier in blue. Take the production identifiers and further split those up into whichever of those production identifiers available. Take the device identifier, go out to Access Good ID, and pull back the column headings here of the distinct fields in Good ID. And what would happen then is in 2018, when this will be more available in electronic health records, a patient like baby here who had a central venous catheter would have this implantable device list as part of their outgoing paperwork as something that carries through with their continuous care. And all of that would be based on that device identifier. Moving from there, how do we enable that process? How do we help those health IT vendors? We provide two ways for public access to standard device identification data. For those of you who have not heard, Open FDA, and I give the website here, is a way to allow public access to the Good ID data, and will allow association from Good ID currently to FDA classification system data, but also in the future we expect it to be to other data sets like adverse events and recalls. In addition, we have and have had for 2 years this public access to Access Good ID. And again, the website link is here, and this is the home page. What I want to show you is that device identifier that I showed on that implantable device list could be part of a record to pull back. This is data pulled from Good ID today. It shows a standard brand name, version or model, the device identifier number, and then it also has more information, device characteristics, whether this device is MRI safe, whether it contains latex, and so on, and also a GMDN term. This is a global medical device nomenclature term, which is meant to be a device categorization tool. And you see that the record not only has that term, but has the definitions to make sure that this is the term that you would like to include. A third page that I have overlaid here looks at clinically relevant size and whether the device is packaged and sterile. So there are over 60 attributes in the Good ID database that are available today on those 1,100,000 records that I mentioned. Very quickly, UDI as a standard, we are ensuring that this becomes a standard, but we also are emphasizing that UDI as part of standards, in standards. And so I'm not going to go through each of these, but these are an example of where the UDI adoption team at FDA is spending their time making sure that UDI is integrated into each of these standards in a very consistent way to support adoption. Based on that infrastructure development, we are also working with health systems and with registries and researchers on two, I only highlight two here, but these two have a website that you can go out and look for more information. These provide us with opportunities to test those standards, to test UDI, and evaluate to improve the data in our database. Also, in addition to those pilots, and as a complement to them, as I mentioned, we are working with ARM. They have developed this learning UDI community, which is open to all. The idea is that it has a steering committee. FDA is one of the members of that committee, and that committee works on the governance of what issues that the UDI community will address. Current Learning UDI community active work groups include those that are listed here. There's a community working on a better common understanding of what unit of use means for a device, issues related to the recognition of AIDC on the packages, clinically relevant size, which just had a kickoff meeting today, and then a group on product categorization. And so now I'd like to turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Terry. As you can see, FDA is really working, striving to work very closely with manufacturers, with healthcare providers, with patients to reap the benefits of UDI, and it's something that I think FDA should be commended on. The fact that, traditionally the approach has been, here's a regulation, and we're going to enforce it. And this current approach of let's work together and identify what's the benefit that we can all get, it's very refreshing. So we're going to shift now to our panel discussion session of our event today. And we have a number of topics that we'd like to cover with both Terry and Arya. And we'll start with the question that many people have in their mind is, are we done drawing lines on the package? As you can see from the image on the left, you can actually go on the internet and hire or commission an artist to write a custom barcode. And the focus for many companies has been on, I need to put barcodes on my product. And if you are a Class 2 device, or a Class 1, Class 1 and Class 3 device, you already have that already done. And the challenge now is what benefits do you get out of implementing this solution? So the question is, are we done, or have we simply reached the end of the beginning? And Terry, I'd like to turn it back to you and give us your perspective on where we are and what we can get out of UDI.
So thanks, Dan. As I mentioned in my presentation very, very quickly, we are, like I would say, if you were to think of a quality improvement cycle with the planning, doing, checking, and acting, we are in the third phase in terms of UDI adoption. We've set up the infrastructure, we are working on pilots, and now we're evaluating those pilots for usefulness of UDI. So I mentioned the build pilot, the build initiative. That includes, as an outcome, it's still in process, but the outcome will be a roadmap for other hospitals, a how-to guide. There's also a part of that build project that will work on a build consortia to have experts who support the work. That consortia, that build project also includes manufacturers. And the idea is that they will extend a project that was done a couple years ago where they took the UDI from the cath lab products and followed them and integrated them into all systems across the hospital, and are even working with a registry to take from the health records into that registry. Also, in addition, as Dan has put up this nest, and I mentioned that UDI is a pillar for the real-world data that will support the real-world evidence development in NEST. The coordinating center, the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, has been announced and will drive the development of NEST through strategically chosen and innovative demonstration projects. Part of those projects are going to be to build cooperative agreements and promote methodologies. And so we see UDI and the build project and RAPID and the Learning UDI community as mature pilots that could be easily incorporated into NEST goals, and we're working to identify ways to do that.
And Terry, to build on what you just said. Is NEST going to be an FDA-only database or registry, or is NEST going to be a publicly available data source?
So NEST is really focused on the partnerships. It is a public-private partnership. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium is the coordinating center. But the idea is that the coordinating center, works with all of the partners listed on this diagram, to identify what is the most effective methodologies and ways to meet the goals of NEST to improve device evaluation.
And really, that if you're a device manufacturer, there's so much value in having this real-world data that is collated, aggregated, and managed in a standardized fashion. So this is a huge opportunity, I think. Terry, one of the other points that we talked about is, what's the value of adding UDI on claim forms? Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what FDA is doing in that area?
Sure. So this letter that's shown here is actually a public letter that and it's really a recommendation to CMS to do something that they're already doing anyway. They are supporting the UDI in claims data. FDA and CMS and multiple stakeholders have been working together for 2 years in a standards body called ANSI X12. That group sets the standards for how information is passed in a claim and other administrative data from a healthcare provider to a payer. And I can report that we are at a point where I believe almost all of the barriers have been removed, and we can expect that the device identifier in claims has a great potential. That's not completely finished, but it has now a great potential based upon the efforts of many, many organizations, including Office of Inspector General, that the device identifier will be in claims hopefully in 2023. It is now going forward as part of the package for changes to the claims data. And that's just recent activity, and so we're very happy about that.
Right, hot off the presses.
Yes.
So, Arya, I know you've worked with medical device companies both in the U.S. and around the world for almost 30 years. Can you provide some of your insights, having worked with these companies on UDI and how it can be leveraged?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. Yeah, I mean, UDI, when you're looking at it, is really just beyond the DI to the good ID submission. You could almost say that UDI through the DI and the PI is almost like the new DNA representation of the product. So if we look at it from different perspectives, and let's start off with how to improve, improving upon product quality. If you take a look at, all the way from manufacturing through post-product launch, if you look at CAPA complaints, for example, UDI can be effectively used as part of the incoming complaint CAPA process, in that it allows manufacturers to be able to quickly identify product attributes of the device, such as, for example, the product model, manufacturing location, lot and batch runs, serial numbers. And from the serial numbers, the manufacturer can quickly identify who the registered owners are of the devices, such that proper notifications can be sent to registered owners in a much more quick and efficient manner. And it also provides the information needed for submitting an adverse event notification to the FDA in the event that it's an adverse event. When you're looking with traceability throughout the distribution changed to registered end users, patients, distributors, and health facilities, UDI can easily find affected products, quarantine them, allow them to remove from service, and send back to the manufacturer if needed. If we look at the use of UDI for user evaluations in clinical trials, for those that may be on the phone listening and have had experience in this, managing global user evaluation trials and clinical trials is a very monumental task. So UDI can be effectively used to track and link the devices used to the actual trial sites, whether they be health facilities or in the home. They can then be linked to each respective patient that is part of the trial and the reporting clinician, thereby affecting closing the loop as to where the device is used, on which patient was it used, and the product that has been used on, and who's the attending clinician, and the recording of the observed anomaly event into the clinical trial log. Now, the ease of doing this is that we now have barcoding everywhere within health facilities. You can barcode the attending clinician that's either there during the trial. So the clinician's information is already identified. You barcode the patient's ID, so you have the relevant information. You scan the UDI. All this information can be entered in electronic record, and then whatever observations or notes can also be electronically entered in through a tab or a PC. So it really has strong applications in managing user trials and clinical trials, globally. If you're looking at another value of UDI, and that is how can you expedite customer feedback on the user experience of a product? And that really goes back to, upfront form, fit, and function of the product. So the UDI can be used by health facilities and patients as a way of sending information about their experience in the use of the device and any noted observations or recommended improvements. For example, here, you can develop a simple app for your smartphone or your iPad. And basically, you can scan the UDI into the phone. It loads up and brings up the UDI app that can be directly connected to the manufacturer's secure website, which would allow the end user of the product, again, that could be a healthcare clinician, it could be the patient, and allows them the ability to enter in information about the use of the product, whether it's ways of improving upon it or anomaly events that they have seen. So this provides for a very effective means post-product launch that can be used. However, you could take the same approach and apply it for user trials or clinical trials. So I'll turn that back over to you, Dan.
Great, Arya. The other key benefit that UDI provides is around improving product quality. I've been privileged to be a member of the Case for Quality initiative, which FDA originated, and then now it's a partnership between the agency, MDIC, and medical device manufacturers and other constituents. And one of the things we've been working on is actually creating a consumer report-like evaluation for medical devices. So you can compare, to Terry's point earlier, if you're looking for a mid-size, four-door mid-size car with good mileage, which one would be the best? Well, if you're looking for an implantable defibrillator for this type of patient, what would be the most recommended device? So we've been working, and we actually developed a pilot where we put together a report card, if you will, for medical device quality based on information that is available. And really, the availability of information in NEST will help the entire ecosystem unlock the value of the data. If you're interested in learning more about this, you can go to the MDIC website and download the report. But I think this is another key benefit of UDI, because UDI serves as the primary key that enables you to connect the information between manufacturers, regulators, providers, and patients in order to improve outcomes and improve product quality. So let's obviously managing UDI data and metadata can help improve outcomes. In the FDA report on coordinated registry networks of virtual care and research, it talks about the fact that UDI needs to be incorporated into health information systems from the point of entry in the supply chain through billing. And really, unique patient identification are critical in order to associate device follow-up and patient outcomes across most systems. Terry, can you tell us a little bit more about the need to better manage this master data and metadata in order to support some of these goals?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So I think from the very beginning, from when we were first designing the Global Unique Device Identification Database, we saw that as a source of truth for medical device. The manufacturers are spending tremendous resources submitting the data to FDA. We have these UDIs on products. The device identifier that's on that UDI is linked to our database, is validated. You know, by linking to our database, you are validating that this is an FDA validated record. And this we see as a way of, you know, we should look for opportunities to integrate and manage UDI across, as what Bill did. They are managing across their entire healthcare system. As Aria mentioned, you know, the manufacturers managing across their system. It's basically, we want to call the product and use the same device identifier wherever it's used. We want to include the data, the standard core data from GoodID in all master data files. So if you think of a master data file for a registry, for EHRs, whoever is now collecting text or non-standard data, the vision is to rely on that data in the GoodID. And we have had those who are innovative thinkers, in particular, I don't know if you have the slides, Dan, but Vascular Quality Initiative, which is a patient safety organization, has shown that they have integrated UDI into their registry. It isn't complete, so they are recognizing that they need to transition from the catalog numbers and product numbers that they have today to link those together with the device identifiers as they become available, so that we have a transition period where device identifiers become more of the norm. Can you hear me, Dan?
Yes, I know that you
Okay.
had mentioned that through MedSun, FDA is also working on
Yes.
aligning some of this information. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, so we have worked, MedSun, for those of you who may not have heard that term, is the Medical Product Safety Network. It is a partnership between FDA and hospitals for reporting adverse events. And those adverse events are reported on a website that FDA puts together through that program, MedSun. That website now includes a way to enter UDI data, and once the user enters UDI, the MedSun program, that website will go through the steps that I showed you earlier, which is take the UDI, split it up into the device identifier and production identifier, auto-populate from the good ID into the fields that are relevant in adverse event reporting. And so by having that available now in medicine, that device identifier can be linked to a patient's record as that becomes available, to a registry as that becomes available. So we are looking, again, for those who are providing those examples to others, those roadmaps, showing the value of UDI. And it's happening, and we expect it to be increasing, the number of examples that we can cite.
Excellent. Thank you, Terry. Aria, one of the questions that always comes up is, okay, so how can I, as a medical device manufacturer, leverage UDI across my product life cycle? And, you know, there's always a need to have an integrated platform in order to make that happen. Can you share that with our audience?
Yes. Well, you can basically, look at UDI as becoming the new single source of truth. So when you combine UDI with an enterprise platform, it essentially then starts becoming the single source of truth, and with the enterprise platform provides for digital continuity, which facilitates complete transparency and traceability of the product throughout the product life cycle, from development through your user evaluations, clinical trials, through your regulatory submissions, manufacturing, distribution change, to your healthcare facilities, pharmacies, and then to your registered end users of the products, which again could be healthcare professionals and patients, given the proliferation of a lot of implant devices, both active and passive, as well as on-body devices that are being very heavily pushed, like insulin pumps, continuous glucose monitoring sensors, and other physiologic sensors. Other applications, as we briefly said, if we looked into, from CAPA complaints, is being able to link the CAPA complaints to your UDI. You then have the ability, for full traceability of linking it to your root cause analysis, the requirements change, design change, verification, validation, any changes that need to be made in the manufacturing process, regulatory notifications, letters to files on new UDI submissions can be linked back to the original UDI. End user notifications and field corrective actions can be linked to it. As Terry also just mentioned earlier, submitting of adverse events with traceability to the affected product's UDI really provides for a seamless traceability of closing the loop, which is critical, from the initial complaint to the final end resolution of closing out the complaint. UDI can also be used, as we briefly mentioned, for new product features enhancements, product line extensions through additions of new features, all which can be linked back to your original UDI of that product line. From a manufacturing supply chain perspective, it really provides an effective means for supply chain management, especially when you have to coordinate parts and manufacturing builds across hundreds of parts and various manufacturing locations. Often with manufacturers, they do not have really an effective means for tracing products through global distribution manufacturing operations and complex distribution networks, especially when you're employing multi-tiered third-party distributors and GPOs. So implementing a global UDI traceability program throughout your distribution network, it really helps ensure complete traceability from the manufacturer to the end user. And what's critical in that is, in the case that there is an event with a product and that product needs to be removed from service, by utilizing UDI as your tracing mechanism, you can then trace, those specific affected lot batch runs of products from your manufacturing facility to your warehouse, to your various distributors, even down to the extent of retail pharmacies, healthcare facilities, and patients, enabled to be able to make notifications and inform them of changes or what they have to do with that product. Other applications, as we briefly discussed about earlier, is recording of anomaly events and being able to very effectively drive adverse event recordings. As Terry mentioned, even within the hospital, for them to implement systems within the hospital, which could be more efficient and allow them more effectively not only to report adverse events to the FDA, or problems, but also report that to the manufacturer, because quite often observed problem anomalies and adverse events sometimes are often written on paper that are sometimes misplaced or lost, so they're either delayed in sending that information out, or the information never gets sent out.
Great point.
So right.
Excellent.
Oh.
So let's go ahead and transition over to the audience portion of our Q&A. Craig, turn it to you.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, now is your opportunity to have your questions answered by our presenters. Please remember the portion of this conference is also being recorded. To ask a question, use the questions and answers panel on your screen. Type your question in the area provided and press enter. We're going to get to as many questions as we can in the time remaining. Just note on the questions, I know a lot of people have product-specific questions, so in the interest of time, we're going to try and keep those questions offline, so I encourage you to contact our presenters for specific questions. But for now, I will turn it over to Dan to moderate the Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you, Craig. So Terry, we have a number of questions from the audience around international standards and other regulatory bodies. I know you can't speak for regulators other than FDA, but can you share a little bit about what's going on around global standardization for UDI with your involvement in IMDRF?
Yes. So as you probably know, there was an IMDRF UDI guidance put out in December of 2013, and I believe there's, in conversations with other regulators, we are all attempting to stay true to the principles of that document, to the extent that we can, and we are all recognize that that's important, global harmonization. As an example, in addition to that work, there was an IMDRF common data elements work group that I was participated in, and we made sure that we integrated UDI into that work. Those were, if you're not aware of that work item, it was to identify the core common data elements for regulatory submissions, and so we highlighted UDI as part of that. We also, in our pilots, I talked about RAPID, the peripheral vascular pilot. They involve international registries, and so we've worked through those pilots some issues related to global medical device nomenclature, all with the focus on, how do we stay aligned to the extent we can? How do we promote adoption and promote the value of UDI internationally?
Great. I have another question that maybe you can answer, and then Arya can comment on. In your analogy of device and the car, one of the differences is that the manufacturer for the car knows who the owner is. And so in the case of medical devices, will medical device manufacturers have access to that patient data And tied into that, there's another question around the security of that data and making sure that either patient data and or confidential manufacturing data isn't shared.
So right now, honestly, we're focusing on trying to tie that patient implant, the implantable device, and the UDI from it, and link that to the patient. And I recognize it sounds like it's going beyond that, to somehow use that information and share it back with the manufacturer. That's a little down the road. I honestly, we haven't had conversations about that. I would think that today there is information passed from the hospital back to the manufacturer on implantable devices in some cases. And so we'd have to understand the issues related to passing that information, the HIPAA issues. Again, that is outside of FDA's authority. What we're trying to do is work on getting that linkage made so that we can all benefit.
Great. Ari, a question for you around, the platform and how can medical device manufacturers leverage all this data and have, the value of UDI and use it in a harmonized way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, with global distributed manufacturing locations, which a lot of companies have these days around the world, whether it's direct or through third party, having an enterprise platform basically unites all these operations via a common platform, which really facilitates cross-collaboration not only among all of your internal business units, but also external, which could be with third-party subcontract manufacturers or designers. But importantly is that you're all sharing the data from one common source of information under one single unified change management control system. Quite often, people are using different systems, different paper methods, and you're not exactly sure what is your most latest revisions that you're actually working with. The values to an enterprise platform system, you can look at have far-reaching implications for medical device companies, especially in a globalized world. It provides manufacturers with the ability to more effectively manage which products can be sold into which countries. That is a major problem with medical device manufacturers that are manufacturing a wide range, of products that they have to oversee, and ensuring that those products are not somehow making their way into countries for which those products don't have local regulatory approval. Inventory management control is a major issue. In an effort to reduce inventory carrying costs, many manufacturers are trying to implement just-in-time manufacturing in an effort to reduce inventory carrying costs. So having, an enterprise platform can allow manufacturing operations to more effectively know what the production builds are by product model and by the respective manufacturing operation. And you could take that and link that to what is your sales distribution globally, so you know exactly which products are being sold into which countries, and what is your booking rate relative to your production shipping. In managing DI to good ID submissions, enterprise systems provide regulatory affair and quality departments. Depends on which company. Some companies, RA does the DI to good ID submissions. Sometimes it's in quality. But this way, it gives the departments the ability to have access to a common set of data regarding the complete status of the DI to good ID submissions globally by product and by country. And as we've heard and read, there are many countries that are starting to implement their own UDI systems. And with many companies having distributed regulatory affairs departments within local countries that are responsible for those local submission approvals, having an enterprise system facilitates these remote regulatory affair departments with the ability to access the required data necessary for completing the DI record from a single source of information, thereby accelerating their time to prepare and submit a DI record with the appropriate information needed for that local country's good ID submission. It also allows senior management within companies the ability to have a global status overview regarding all of the DI submissions and approvals globally, by product, by country, thereby knowing at any one time where they are in the final approval process necessary for product launch for those countries which have implemented a UDI solution. It also provides companies with the ability to more effectively manage product complaints and resolutions on a global basis, and also allows you to really more effectively address nonconformance reports.
Great. Thank you, Ari. I think we have a lot of questions, and unfortunately we're running out of time, so we'll answer one more question. If we have not been able to get to your particular question, we will make sure to get back to you offline. Terry, this question is to you. What have been the primary concerns about UDI expressed to the FDA by industry, and what changes, if any, do you expect as a result of those?
So I think the primary concern, relates to the fact that the UDI is a new concept. It's associated with, the data attributes that have never really been consolidated into one place. And so there's a lot of work around education and a common understanding. What FDA is doing and what we have been doing is trying to reach out, provide education, respond to our help desk questions, provide webinars, and with this Learning UDI community through ARM, we are taking that a little bit further by offering an opportunity for manufacturers and healthcare providers and those in supply chain to converse and to build a community around a common understanding of some of these new concepts so that we, all receive the value that we so want. I don't think I had the Learning UDI community website available, or we didn't put it anywhere, but I'd be happy, to share that and provide it if there are messages sent out to the users after this discussion.
Great. So, I want to thank you all for attending the session. If you are interested in additional information about FDA's UDI initiative, here's the landing page for that at the FDA website. For more information about Dassault Systèmes Life Science offerings, there's a link, and for additional information about Accendia, visit our website. Once again, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you today. We hope that you found this webinar valuable, and as I mentioned, we will make sure to get back to you on any questions that we were not able to address due to time. Craig, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much. On behalf of FDA News and Dassault Systèmes, I would like to thank our participants for joining us today. Be sure to fill out the survey at the conclusion of this webinar. Your feedback is very important to us. This now concludes today's webinar. Have a great day, and I hope you join us again in the future.